to Raffingers What's in the Briefcase, which is our discussion about the spring budget with for 2021. It's going to be me hosting the program for about an hour, and we've got various other partners that are going to join us throughout the course of the hour. A short background about me for those who haven't had the pleasure or pain of meeting me before. I'm the tax partner at Raffingers. I've worked at a number of firms over the years, and I had 20 odd years in HMRC, mainly as an investigator, but I left in 2004, and it's okay because I'm cute and cuddly now and quite approachable. Other partners that are going to join us, as you can probably see on the screen, we have Yedidia, Paul and Lee. And what I'm going to do is just give these guys a chance to introduce themselves, tell you a little bit about themselves, and then I'm going to ask some of the crunching questions. What particularly sort of tweaked their interest about the budget, what was interesting or whatever. I'm going to start with Yedidia. Give us a short background as to who you are and what you do, and then maybe just talk us through for a couple of minutes some of the things that excited you about the budget or surprised you.
Right, Neil. Right, so I'm Yedidia. I've been with Raffingers for the last 18 months and enjoyed every minute of it. I have a broad range of clients. My particular focus is, though, on the property sector, buy-to-let sector, and the charity sectors. With regards to the budget, obviously the Chancellor had a difficult task yesterday. He had to encourage growth. He had to encourage investment. At the same time, he had to be able to pay for all the support which the government's given in the past 12 months without putting anybody off. I think he did achieve that. What did he get right? Well, he's extended the support. To some extent, he's tried to manage the cliff edges, that being the point at which government support stops and businesses are left to fend for themselves. What do I think he got wrong? I think the level of complexity.
No. Where did Yedidia go?
Have we lost Yedidia? Has he lost his thread? And
No, I think the aliens have got him.
we love the tech. Well, we'll find out where Yedidia's gone. When he comes back, he can continue. In the meantime, it's just down to the three of us now. So, do you know what? I'm going to put the same thing. Paul, do you want to sort of take the baton from where Yedidia clearly fell after the first hurdle, technically? And tell us a little bit about yourself and things that struck you about the budget.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Neil. Hopefully I don't disappear as well.
It's going to be me.
I love the technology. So my name's Paul Dell. I'm a partner here at Raffingers. Been at Raffingers for the past 6.5 years, having merged my practice in and been in practice for sort of over 30 years, dealing mainly with owner-managed businesses. The budget yesterday, back end of last year, rumours were rife on sort of significant changes to capital taxes. But thankfully, none of that came to fruition. The Office of Tax Simplification issued a review sort of middle of last year, and we were sort of slightly concerned that some of that might have been taken up in terms of capital gains tax and inheritance tax and stuff. But thankfully, nothing happened. But I do think it's one for the future, and he'll just consult on the interaction of these capital taxes. And I'm sure it's a case of watch this space, unfortunately.
Sure. Was there anything in particular that sort of grabbed you? Because I know one of your specialist areas is inheritance tax and planning and probate.
It was almost a non-event for inheritance tax. The nil rate band, which is 325,000 and has been since 2009, can you believe, is now to be frozen until April 26. So unfortunately, that just brings more and more people into the inheritance tax net. So planning at an early stage is good in IHT, but yeah, it was really a non-event for inheritance tax. The
was a lot of
residential
question,
rate
really.
band as well, also frozen at 175 again till April 26. So just freezing all of these thresholds. And then on the pension side, again, rumours were rife about possible restrictions on pension tax relief, but no changes really. No changes. The annual limits. The lifetime allowance frozen at 1.07 million, roughly, again for a further four or 5 years. That's frozen now. So yeah, apart from really just freezing thresholds, no wholesale changes in terms of inheritance tax, pensions, capital gains tax. ISA limit stayed the same, 20,000 per annum. Junior ISAs, 9,000 per annum. So he's pretty much kicked the can down the road on all of these taxes.
Fair enough. Okay, thanks for that, Paul. We appear to have Yedidia back. Where did you go? Was it a quick cup of tea?
Well, when I started saying what I think the Chancellor got wrong, obviously I got kicked off.
Yeah, we're into conspiracy theories, aren't we? Sort of thing. The government were like, no, nothing negative. God, do you want to pick up on where you'd got to, and then some of your thoughts on the budget itself?
Yeah, where I think I got to was perhaps where the Chancellor didn't get things quite as we would have hoped. And that is because the trend has been over the past few years to simplify the tax regime in the UK, make things simpler. The legislation is just so complex. And some of the measures he's introduced, particularly with the different bands of corporation tax and the taper in between the two of them, that just introduced a whole level of complexity which we weren't asking for. But to go back to what he got right, I think he's given businesses signposts that they wanted. People accept that they're going to have to pay a bit of more tax to cover all the schemes which the government and all the help that they've put out. They just want to know when it's going to happen and some dates. And I think he's done that successfully and given businesses the confidence they were looking for.
Okay. I know later you've got a few thoughts on the stamp duty holiday and mortgages, so we'll come back to you a little bit later for your views on that, Yedidia. But I can see that Lee is chomping at the bits, like a trained, pristine racehorse ready to come out of the traps. So Lee, give us a bit of background about you and anything that jumped out the budget that you thought.
Yeah, hi guys. Yeah, been with Raffingers well over 30 odd years. Started as a junior, specialising in recruitment companies, SMEs, also helping businesses grow, looking at business development, certified profit first professional to really help people manage their cash flows and so forth. So on the budget, I think there was a couple of things that sort of sprung to mind that I thought would be interesting to talk about. This new recovery loan scheme, basically looking into a bit more detail, it just seems to be sort of a rehash of the C-bills and the bounce back loans that have come into an end. I think it was the end of this month they come to an end. So I think they've just extended the scheme and called it something a bit more snazzy. So I think the banks will be the people that you need to go to, and they'll be approved lenders again. We've got contacts within our practice where if you haven't already got a C-bills and a bounce back loan, we can try and get this new loan put in place for you. I think at the end of the year you've got to apply by, so it's quite nice that if somebody in hospitality or that sort of sector, the leisure industry, just has run out of money maybe already, with a bounce back loan, they can then upgrade and get a little bit more than the 50 grand that they got with a bounce back loan. So I think that's really good that they've seen the need for additional funding. The problem is obviously you've got to speak to your bank, and some of the horror stories I've heard with the banks trying to get these loans put through quick enough. So that's just another story really.
Interesting stuff. Okay, so I tell you what, we'll drift back to Yedidia just to sort of talk a little bit about what you thought about the stamp duty holiday. When we've discussed a couple of these, I'm going to talk generally about tax and the effects on individuals and companies, just as some headlines that we can chat about later. So if you have tuned in to see how it affects you directly, don't drift away. We are going to come on to some of the more specifics in a while. But back to Yedidia, just the stamp duty holiday and perhaps the sort of mortgage assistance. Any thoughts on that?
Yes. So in the beginning of the pandemic, obviously people couldn't go to viewings, and the housing market kind of stalled. So in order to reinvigorate that, in July 2020, the Chancellor introduced a stamp duty holiday on the first £500,000 of the cost of a residential property. So that means no stamp duty up to £500,000, and thereafter there are various tiers at which stamp duty kicks in. This did stimulate the market, and to the extent that there's actually a backlog of people waiting to get their property sales through before what was the original deadline of the 31st of March 2021. So what the Chancellor has done now is he's extended the deadline to the 30th of June 2021. That means that any sales until 30th of June, there will be no stamp duty on the first £500,000. That is cut to £250,000 by the 30th of September. And from the 1st of October 2021, the rate goes back down to £125,000, on which no stamp duty is paid. It's worth bearing in mind that this is only for somebody who's buying their only residential property. People who are going for a second home or a second property, legislation already has added on another 3% onto each of the tiers. So they will pay 3% on the first £500,000, etc. I do have all the tiers. I've written a blog this morning, which is going on our website. So if anybody wants to see the tiers, they can log on and have a look. The Chancellor said that he expects that this will save people about £4,500 on the price of a property. Circumstantial evidence from the estate agents is that actually people are putting up house prices because they know that they can compensate, they have some leeway. So as far as stimulating the housing market, yes, he has. Has he made properties more affordable? I'm not so sure. In fact, first-time buyers already qualify for a stamp duty holiday of £300,000 outside of London and £500,000 within London. So this is not actually a scheme which is targeting first-time buyers at all. It's more people who already own a home looking to move on to something bigger, perhaps. So it seems that they are the ones who are going to benefit from this scheme. Moving on then to the mortgage guarantee scheme, the Chancellor said himself that it's all very well putting in place a mortgage holiday, but first-time buyers are struggling even to be able to afford a deposit. So what he's brought in is a mortgage guarantee scheme where buyers will only have to put down a 5% deposit, and the government will guarantee a 95% mortgage, which will make things more affordable for those first-time buyers. This is for mortgages taken out between April 2021 and December 2022, houses up to a value of £600,000, and buyers can fix the rate for up to 5 years if they wish. Apparently, and Lee mentioned the banks before, apparently Lloyds, NatWest, Santander, Barclays, and HSBC are already in on this, and they will be offering mortgages straight away, with other providers intending to offer products later on. Will this help? Well, the British Property Federation seems to think that based on their experience from the last mortgage scheme in 2016, they think that that also just put prices up and didn't really help buyers. They're saying, let's build more housing stock, let's provide more affordable houses, and that's the way to move things forward. I suppose they might say that, but there you go.
Okay, that's really interesting. Yeah, thanks for sort of sharing that with us. I'm going to change tack slightly. I'm going to talk about a couple of the sort of headline announcements for tax. I'll talk briefly about personal tax, and then we'll perhaps just throw it about between us. So personal allowances, this is generally increased by respective governments based on the consumer price index. It's the amount that you can earn before you pay tax. And Rishi Sunak came up with, I would say, possibly an innovative idea that, so basically there will be an increase to 2021, but then he's going to hold that in place for 5 years. So our tax-free allowances are going to stay undisturbed for basically 5 years until the 5th of April 2026. And his reasoning behind that is, firstly, people's pay, what they're taking home at the moment, what they're earning, isn't going to be changed. They're not going to get an immediate tax burden. But he's thinking as he published in his notes, was that as and when sort of wages basically go up, he's hoping that more people are going to get into the higher rate tax bracket, so there will be some sort of tax recovery at a later stage. Just a couple of quick things before we start discussing that. There's also some opportunities for environmental and social investors with the Green Savings Bond, which allows people to sort of put funds into a green project. And there's going to be some further guidance on what that means in terms of tax breaks a bit later. There's also an extension to the social investment tax relief, which is, for those of you who don't know, investment in social enterprises, community businesses. And for those of you who are perhaps familiar with EIS investments, it's a very similar sort of animal that you've got capital gains breaks when you come out of this. You've got a tax reliever when you go into this. You just have to have the investment for 3 years. But let's go back to the personal allowances. My personal view is I think this was quite a good idea because we're deferring the tax hit on people, but eventually it will hopefully generate some income. I'll go to Paul. I haven't troubled you very much so far. You got any thoughts on the personal allowances and how that's going to work?
No, I think what the Chancellor's done is he's achieved some increases in revenues over the next 4 or 5 years without actually increasing tax rates. So he's pulled that one off quite well. And they have increased personal allowance significantly over the last 4 or 5 years. So now at £12,500, and that with the basic rate band means you're sort of at 50,000 before you get into higher rates anyway.
Yeah.
But obviously over the next 4 or 5 years, if you freeze allowances with general increases, then it will drag more people into the tax net and it will drag more people into higher rates. But he's managed to stick with a manifesto promise of no income tax increases, but basically increasing his tax revenue over the next 4 or 5 years. So hats off to him for achieving that.
Yeah, I think I'd agree. Lee, have you got similar thoughts to Paul, or?
Yeah. I agree. It's a sneaky way of increasing taxes without increasing taxes. So yeah, I agree. It's a clever way of doing it.
Okay. I wasn't particularly going to go into a lot of details about the social investment tax relief or free ports or anything like that. But another thing perhaps at this stage that we should talk about is the self-employed income support scheme, which has been extended, I think, into a 4th and 5th grant up until September. Again, personally, my view, I think Rishi Sunak said that although hopefully we're going to sort of come out of our sort of problems with COVID and bits and bobs, we still need to keep investing. And I think it's quite a good thing, really. Has anyone got any views on whether it should have gone on longer or it should have been promoted sooner, or do we think we should have brought this to a close now? You did here. I'll go to you. Have you got any thoughts on that?
The self-employment support scheme came in quite late, and there was quite a lot of disappointment, I think, that the government hadn't brought that in earlier. There'd been the furlough for normal salaried workers, but those in self-employed were really struggling. So this might be a bit too late, but I think it's not too little. I think it's a fair, and he's tapered that down as well. So I think he looks at the average profits and based on the percentage of income or fall in income, he's tapered that down as well. So I think he has achieved a fairness. He has given people the help they needed and tapered it off so that people get used to the new reality.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. I mean, I'll throw it open to the other partners in a minute. I mean, just to be clear, the rules say that you must have traded in 2019, 20 and 2021. It's limited to profits of no more than 50,000. And perhaps more importantly, the 2019-20 self-assessment return must have been submitted by the 2nd of March. So these are the sort of qualifying conditions. And to be honest, as accountants, I think that all makes sense to us. Lee, have you got any thoughts?
No. Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I think they mentioned about a 5th one, aren't they, or a 6th one, another one at the end of the year. Being interesting to see how that goes. Of course, both of those guys who have earned £50,001 profit get absolutely nothing, which is a shame. And also, it's a shame they've not done anything with company owners where they've taken divvies. Obviously, a tax planning, a good tax planning route that we've been doing for years. That they're getting basically nothing, which is a shame. And I think they've missed the point there. And a lot of small businesses were drawing their wages that way, and they've had no support for nearly a year now. So I think we was expecting him to do something with that, and he fell short on that.
Yeah, that's fair enough. We've had a question pop up from someone called Catherine. Basically, self-employed grants for those who have no self-employed trade until lockdown restrictions are lifted, but have taken employment work, are they able to claim the grant? Just to go back over the qualifying conditions again, that there has to be a self-employed trade in 1920 and 2021, and the tax return must have gone in. So I think if your trade has been completely kiboshed and you haven't been able to hit the qualifying conditions, then possibly that's not going to be for you. I'm also going to touch on something else. Later, we're going to talk about the corporation tax losses and the various changes and some exciting stuff with capital allowances. We might save that for towards the end of this session and certainly next session. But furlough as well. Again, my view is I don't think he could have given up furlough, and I think extending it is a good thing. I'll go back to you, Didier. Have you got any thoughts on the sort of the extension to furlough, whether it's a good thing for the economy, whether it has to happen?
People need to be in work and people need to be busy, I think. So while furlough is not giving people work at the moment, obviously they're furloughed, they're at home. However, it does give them the confidence and the knowledge that a job will be waiting for them when we come out of this. And I think that's the certainty people are looking for. Businesses who have seen less trade are struggling to pay their workers, and we're having serious discussions about the staff they might have to lay off a year ago. And this has really helped businesses pull through and think about other ways where they can generate income without having to worry about managing and disappointing all those employees who've been supporting them over the years.
Couldn't agree more. Paul, what do you think? Good idea.
Yeah, I mean, look, he had to extend it. It's still supporting millions of jobs out there in the economy. And he's only taken a fairly small, so up until June it stays as it is. There's then some employer contributions from July, August, September, but only sort of scaling up from 10%, 20%, 30%. So I think he's probably got the balance right on that. As we move out of lockdown, hopefully in July, then the employer is starting to contribute a bit towards the cost of it.
Yeah, for sure. Lee?
Nothing more to add. Beautifully covered by those two.
It's like one of those high court decisions with 3 judges, and the guy at the end says what they said.
Yeah.
And then gets paid a fortune for just saying.
Yeah, the crap idea. They should just ban that whole thing.
Okay. One other thing that's perhaps more my specialist area than you guys, although I'd be interested to get your take. There was some changes to research and development, which I'll cover briefly. It does hopefully affect some of the people that are watching if you're in an R&D sort of company. It was interesting. It cropped up within the budget notes, but to be honest, what they've suggested has been a talking point for a long time. This isn't any news to the R&D practitioner. What they're talking about is capping the R&D tax credit to £20,000 plus 3 times the company's pay-as-you-earn and NIC liability. So in English, what does this mean? As a firm, we do a lot of research and development claims. And typically speaking, the largest part of most claims are the staffing costs of the people that work for the companies that carry out the R&D. And you can attach an element of their salary and their pension contributions that are paid as part of a claim, as long as there's a qualifying R&D activity that goes on. And I think HMRC have always been a bit jumpy when you have, say, some smaller companies with no payroll costs at all. And a lot of the R&D work is sort of hived out to subcontractors, people not on the books. And I think HMRC have always had a little bit of a problem paying tax credits out to companies that aren't employers of people. So this is nothing new. A couple of years ago, there was talk about limiting any sort of R&D tax credit repayment. If you haven't got a payroll bill, you're not going to get it. You can increase your losses. You can do some tax planning on loss work, but that was it. So this actually for the clients that we're acting for is, I don't think, going to affect them at all, because most of our claims are actually substantial employers of people. I suppose it's a rotten question to throw this out to anyone else, because this is absolutely my ballpark rather than yours. I'll go to Lee first. What do you think, or is it just what I said?
No, I think I'll pass that back to Neill.
Okay.
We will defer to your expertise on the subject.
Really agree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to talk about this at length because I should imagine it's less than 5% of the people watching this morning this will affect. But if you have any questions to do with R&D generally or sort of what this means, you can always drop us an email, always get in touch. I'll quite happily have a chat with you because it beats work. Paul, Udidia, any thoughts, or should we just move swiftly on from that?
No, we bow to your expertise on it now.
Yeah, I was hoping you were going to say that. In 5 minutes or so, we're going to say goodbye to Paul and Lee and Udidia, and we're going to be joined by 3 fresh-faced new partners with their own thoughts. I just wondered, is there anything else in the budget that sort of cropped up that we haven't sort of covered already? I mean, Lee, I think, were you talking about restart loans and new business loans?
We've done that. So the recovery loans I covered right at the beginning, but there is the help to grow management courses and the help to grow digital, which I had a little bit of research this morning, and it's sort of live on the Gov's website. But that's really handy for the management scheme. You can join a 12-week management course that's being run by some business schools. And those courses would normally cost like $7,500, but the government are paying 90% towards it. And it's an online course that the prospectus looks really good. So I think that'd be quite nice for those people who want to improve their sort of management and business skills. And on the back of that, the help to grow digital, I think, is really good that they're trying to help people look at new software and improve their systems. And again, there's a 50% contribution to any new software. They haven't yet announced what software will be applicable, but it'd be really interesting to have a look. But you can sign up online to get sort of updates and be sort of first on the list. So I would definitely do that if that's something that is interesting to some people.
Super stuff. Paul, have you got any thoughts, or have we played you out with your budget thoughts?
The only other one I'd mention is the restart grants that he's brought in as well. So we had initially sort of 25,000 for retail premises or that were locked down. Then we had a further one of 10. We've got another one he announced yesterday of 6. This all coming through the local authority. So those already in the system should get it automatically. Plus, he also announced some discretionary funding to local authorities for businesses that are struggling. Unfortunately, it's all going through the local authorities. And I know from some clients that each authority is different. Some are really on top of the game. Some are struggling a bit. But it's a case of just keep on top of it, keep in touch with the local authority and make sure you're getting what you need.
Super stuff. And Udidia, you have just about a minute to sort of wrap up, if you like, before we bring your replacements on. Any other thoughts, or have you covered everything?
If you were going to ask me what my shock moment of the budget was, I think I would say that's the point where he said he's going to be honest with us. We're not used to seeing that from chancellors. We're seeing them trying to bury the bad news and highlight the good news. But he still did that to some extent. But he said he's going to be honest with us and tell us that he's trying to pay for things, and this is how we're going to have to pay for it. But as I said before, as long as he's clear with us, I think we appreciate that, and it gives us the confidence to invest and grow.
Super stuff. Right, well, I'm going to say thank you very much to Paul, Udidia, and Lee
for your
thoughts. The backroom staff are now hopefully going to link up with 3 new partners. So I'll say goodbye to you guys.
Thanks, Neill. Speak to you later. Bye-bye.
Neil.
When the new guys arrive, it's going to be a little bit more corporate. I've had 1 or 2 questions cropping up. What about the super deduction and capital allowances? We're going to cover that. We're going to talk about the changes to corporation tax with the rates, etc., the capital allowances, the revisions to the carryback of losses. So I'm just going to wait for the new partners to join us, and then we can sort of introduce them, and they can talk a little bit about themselves and see also sort of what parts of the budget they thought were interesting or not. Certainly one of the things that I know one of our partners, Barry's going to talk about. Indeed, Barry, here he is, the first of the new replacements. Morning, Barry. You're right.
Morning, you're right.
And there's Mehul.
Morning, Neil.
And we're going to get Adam joining us very shortly. I was sort of winging it and just paddling water a little bit. I was just going to mention one of the things, Barry, you might talk about is the absence of any changes to the capital taxes regimes, which is disappointing, bearing in mind the amount of work that you did recently to actually trigger some capital gains disposals. But I'll come to you, if I may, in a minute. Neill, I'm going to start with you. Welcome to the forum. Do you just want to give the viewers a short overview as to yourself, what you're about, what you do, and then just talk us through anything that you thought was interesting or unusual about the budget?
Yeah, cheers. Thanks, Neil. Morning, guys. I'm Neill, one of the partners here at Raffingers, and I suppose I provide, general advisory, accountancy, and tax services to all our small and medium clients, and in particular, owner-managed businesses. And I'll say really my passion is more so in terms of helping our clients understand their business goals and really trying to understand what they can do to scale their businesses up. So there's a lot of stuff in this budget which caught my eye. In terms of the budget, my overall view is I think Rishi had a very difficult task to get the balance right between supporting the recovery from the pandemic and balancing the public finances. And like you just said, it was quite refreshing to hear a chancellor who's not hiding a lot of the bad news in the back end of the legislation. So it was quite nice to sort of get an understanding of how he's going to be balancing those public finances. So overall, I think he's done a decent job. I suppose my key standout was really around the super deductions. I think that's a really positive step. Also at the same time, really to mitigate where we are with these CT increases, the corporation tax increase that he announced. And I think it really shows the government's proposal of trying to get some encouragement in terms of investment-led growth, which I think is the best way to trade out of this crisis that we're in at the moment. The sort of key point that I wasn't really happy with was more so around Brexit. As you guys will all know, I love talking about Brexit and understanding how we're going to go forward from this. And I was just hoping a little bit more from them. Heard a little bit about the free ports, and that was about it. So that was something which I was a bit disappointed on, really.
Okay, that's really interesting. We're going to come back and talk in more detail about sort of the technicalities about sort of corporation tax and super deductions. But thanks for that, Neill. I'll move over to Adam next. Tell us a bit about you, Adam, and anything that grabbed you about the budget.
Good morning, everyone. Adam Moody. I'm one of the partners here. I've been a partner for about 18 years now. Been at Raffingers for about 25 years in total. I'm sort of a general practitioner, really. Deal with numerous different types of clients, hopefully also deal with all the internal finance in the practice, which is a challenge at times. In regards to the budget, I think the headline number really was the increase in the corporation tax rate from 2023 to a higher rate of 25% from where we currently are at 19%. And I think we'll be looking at potential planning with a lot of clients with what we can do in respect of keeping their rates lower. So at the moment we have a basic rate of 19%, and that will remain for all businesses that profits are below 50,000, and then there'll be a marginal rate increasing up to 25% for profits over 250,000. Then what we have to bear in mind is that where there's group structures in place, that affects the rates between 50,000 and the 250,000 profit. So we have to look where there's group structures at what tax rates they'll be paying. So I think over the next couple of years, it'll be an interesting time to look at the effect that will have and what planning we can do to help to keep those corporation tax payments down for clients.
Absolutely, yeah. It's, as a tax practitioner, it's we've had years of not having to get involved in marginal rate planning, and thank goodness for tax software is all I can say that should hopefully do it for us. But no, very interesting. Over to Barry. I was speaking to Barry earlier, as I said. Give us an overview of who you are and what you do, Barry, and then sort of give us some headlines on what you thought about the budget, what was there and what wasn't.
Okay, so quickly, my name's Barry Sorf. I'm a partner at Raffingers, like everybody who's on this call, and I've been doing this job for, I know I don't look old enough, 30 years, and I still love it as much as I did the first day. I do a huge amount of work in property and that type, and I do a lot of sectors, but property is where a huge part of my focus is. What did I think about the budget? It was notable for what some of the stuff that was absent, particularly. I did, as you said before, I did a huge amount of work with some clients who were looking to generate capital gains in advance of the budget in fear of quite significant changes, mainly to things like entrepreneurs relief, as we still call it, even though that's not the name of it anymore. And yeah, we rushed through some transactions on early part of this week, only to find it was with wasted effort, but that's the way it is sometimes. And the other thing really is the absence of the word fair. I always run a score on the number of times the Chancellor uses the word fair in his speech, which usually means more, because fair means more. It always sounds fair when it's other people paying. We all like that. He didn't use it, which was kind of new for me, because they always use the word fair.
Well, interesting stuff. So I tell you what, we need, I think, to focus down a little bit more on the corporate side. We touched on a lot of the personal taxes in the first part. Just to throw this out to viewers, if you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to send us an email at info@raffingers.co.uk, and we will do our best to assist. So I'm just looking at some of our internal messages. Okay. So I'd like to come back to some of the trigger points on corporation tax. We've covered the fact that from 1st of April 23, corporation tax profits over 250,000 are going to be taxed at a sort of higher rate of 25%. And as Adam very clearly explained, that we sort of have this marginal rate which graduates between 50,000, which I think accounts, Rishi said, for about 75% of businesses will still be taxed at 19%. But between 50 and 250 will be sort of a graduated increase, which is the way it's always been when we have differences between the lower rate and the higher rate of corporation tax. But the biggest thing to talk about is the initiatives that Rishi came up for this capital allowance super deduction that I think, Mehul, you touched on a little bit earlier. So we think this is a good idea to sort of try and reinvigorate the economy with some investments.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a really positive step, and I know a lot of business owners will be looking at this, and for practitioners like us, it's really good news in a way, because there's going to be a lot of tax planning that's to come with regards to investment in certain plant machinery. So the headline is really the 130% first year allowance on the qualifying new plant and machinery assets, and then you've got the 50% on the special rate, so anything that would have fallen the special rate previously. My personal view is that it really is a good way to drive this investment-led recovery that I think is really the best way for us to trade out of this. I think the Bank of England seem to think that we're going to spring into action as soon as lockdowns lifted, and the economy is going to grow straight away, whereas I think Rishi Sunak's probably got a slightly different view on that, and this sort of slow progress, sort of the middle or end of 2022, when we think the economic growth is going to really pick up. And so I think what he's really trying to do here is just put the onus back into business owners and try and free up some cash that, you know, some business owners may have actually saved over the last couple of months, or as they trade out of this crisis. So for me, I think it's a really positive step. I think what will be interesting for a lot of business owners is, as they progress through these next 18 months, is how they can identify certain assets, how they can tax plan, and how they can finance that. I've already spoken to some of our clients yesterday, immediately as the announcements were made, and they're now actually looking at pushing back some investment that they were planning this month, for example, to later on in the summer, and really drive some growth. So from my view, I think it's a positive step, but I think it's going to have to be well managed, and it means a little bit more work for us to manage the corporation tax planning and I suppose the capital allowances planning that we can do for clients.
For sure. I'm going to come to Barry very shortly, just to pick up on a couple of the sort of nitty gritties, if you like. So this capital allowance super deduction, first year allowance, if you like, is going to apply between the 1st of April 2021 and 31st March 2023. That particularly applies to, if you like, assets that would normally go into a main rate pool. Vehicles are specifically excluded. Assets that are used for leaseback arrangements are going to be specifically excluded. And again, sort of things that wouldn't go into the main rate pool are not going to apply for the 130%. Typically, that can be sort of long life assets and structures, etc. But Barry, what do you think about capital allowances? You got any thought on that?
Yeah, I've got a few thoughts on corporate tax, actually. Because I'm a bit geeky, I actually worked out the marginal rate, because I don't use tax software to do this stuff.
I wouldn't have thought anything else. Go on.
The marginal rate would actually be 26.5% in that bracket between 50 and 250, where the rate rises to 25. So I suspect we're going to be back in the world where we're desperately trying to keep people out of the marginal rate because it's quite heavy. Also, I think that will make quite a huge difference to the amount of work we do in things like R&D, because the relief will become even more valuable by reference to the savings rate that it's going to refer to. The thing I think that we overlook so easily with corporate taxes is you go up from we talk about a rise from 19 to 25, like it's not that big. It's actually a third more tax for people who are affected by the higher rate. So I kind of reiterate Adam's point. I think we're going to do a huge amount of work trying to, I think really actually in the small business sector, even more than the large company sector, where people are going to be revisiting the whole question of what's the best method to trade through, whether they're best through companies or whether to go down the self-employed route, because it massively changes the equation. You're talking about a third more tax for some of those companies.
That's quite interesting. I'm just going to pick up on, there you go. Actually, I got that message. It's just popped up on the screen. Is it David or Dawid? Sorry. If I've pronounced that wrong. Honestly, a flat 25 on corporation tax would have been just fine. This makes calculations extremely complex. Yeah, I'm with you, brother. I get that. And as you point out, particularly when you have groups of companies, I mean, certainly tax software is a saviour when it comes to that. But no, couldn't agree more. Do you not think, perhaps, I'll throw this open to the group and sort of say that if there were two areas that he could look at from a tax point of view, one is corporate and one is personal, that perhaps he has gone the right route with corporate because he's also looking at some of the sort of very, very large businesses and thinking, well, that's going to be an easy hit if we put corporation tax up and try and preserve the lower paid people on their personal tax. Mehul, have you got any thoughts on that? Did he go right going corporate?
Yeah, I think so. I think where the government are coming from on this is really looking at the bigger players in terms of corporation tax and in a way trying to get them to finance the deficit that we're in at the moment. I think if you speak to big businesses, I'm sure they're not pleased. As Barry rightly points out, if you look at it in real terms, you're paying a third more tax. But at the same time, I think a lot of businesses that have possibly, you've got to think about a lot of businesses have stalled in the last 18 months or so by the time we come to September and we're really truly out of this. And a lot of investment decisions, a lot of decisions in terms of growing your business would have been stalled. And so it's a real encouragement to say to small and medium businesses that you can actually, get this extra deduction. And the fact that he's increased the corporation tax, but then on the same time giving them an incentive to try and reduce it, I think is fair. But I think if you speak to a lot of large businesses, they probably won't necessarily think that because it all depends on their personal plans and their investment focus and whether they're going to be utilising something like the super deduction anyway.
Yeah, for sure. Adam, we touched earlier, Adam, about the personal allowances have been frozen for 5 years, and I think there was a consensus with the other partners that wasn't such a bad idea. Do you have any thoughts on sort of like personal tax, corporation tax, and what he's done?
I think my biggest issue, possibly on the corporation tax, is just more that the lower rate was really designed to incentivise companies from abroad to base themselves here and bring income into the UK. And I'm just slightly concerned that having an increased rate back up to 25 may affect that. So may cause less input into the UK as a whole. On the personal side, I tend to agree with the others that he seems to have decided that to try and leave alone there as far as possible. I know the other guys discussed earlier also about possible changes in capital gains tax rates, etc., that have been shelved for now. Although I think they will. The thought is probably later in the year we might see some increase on that side. But I think he's taken probably a fairer decision at this stage to attack more the corporate than the personal side.
Yeah, for sure. I think with corporation tax, I was reading some briefing notes. I think we're broadly in line with a lot of Europe, but we're not particularly better. And I think we're double what Ireland are. But I'm never quite sure that we should sort of use that as a guidance as to what we should be. Barry, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk about it being fair to tax businesses more heavily than individuals. But of course, it does drop through to individuals. If companies are being taxed more heavily, they tend to employ less people. I mean, on the other side of that, of course, it is businesses who have benefited mainly from some of the help that's been given. So it seems fair that they should have to pay it back. I'd also put some context in. It's not that long ago that these companies were faced with 28% corporation tax. It dropped very sharply from 28 down to 19. Actually, was scheduled to go to 17, down to 19, and we're reversing some of that cut. In context of what you just said, apart from Ireland, we are still the lowest in the G7 of the major economies. We will still be a hell of a lot lower than most of the major economies in Europe, the Eastern European ones and Ireland exception. So I think it's unlikely major companies will be looking to relocate elsewhere. Ireland's tempting for them, but the Irish economy has been struggling for quite a few years now. So I think it's a gamble, but it's a calculated gamble. It's still a decrease from where they were 5-6 years ago. So I don't think it will have quite the impact that some people fear.
Yeah, for sure. One thing, when I was reading through all of the various notes as well, we've got a temporary return of the 3-year loss carryback. So I don't know who actually remembers when we were sort of last in this arena with the sort of last sort of problems that we had with the economy. I'm guessing, and I haven't researched it, wasn't it about 2007, 2008, something like that? And they basically made losses a bit more flexible. So for the purpose of our listeners, just to sort of confirm, basically corporate losses, what can you do with a corporate loss? You've made a loss in the year. You can carry it back 12 months and set it against your previous year's trading profits. You can carry it forward pretty much ad infinitum unless you're in sort of farming and agriculture, or it can go sideways if you have a group structure, is broadly the flexibility on losses. We're not talking about terminal losses because that's far too dull to calculate. What they've basically said is if you've made a loss, let me just go to my notes, in 2021 or 21-22, there is the flexibility now to carry losses in those periods back 3 years, set it against previous year's profits. So technically you could have a loss in your accounting year end 31st March 21, and you can carry that back to 31st March 2018. I very much like this. I think it's really good to recognise that some businesses are going to make quite legitimate trading losses. If you're limited to only carrying back 12 months or carrying it forward and you don't know when you're going to utilise it, I think it's, you know, not being political, but I just think he has come up with some really good ideas. And this idea of being flexible on losses and carrybacks, I think it worked really well when I was dealing with this last time about 10 years ago. Barry, I'll go straight to you on this. You got any thoughts on the losses?
I have. I agree with you. It's a good idea, but there are some actual problems with it, because I was looking at this morning for a client, some actual numbers. So the problem, I assume, I haven't actually checked this, but I assume it's a last in, first out, as these things tend to be.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. So if you have the wrong accounting year, and the losses therefore cover 2 accounting periods, actually you can only go, though you can go back 3 years, you've got to go back the previous year first. There may not be that much profit because the pandemic might cover 2 accounting periods if it's in the wrong period. And then, so you're going back to, you actually only got 2 years that you can use rather than 3 in those instances. And in the particular example I was looking at, he had a very large R&D claim 2 years ago, which meant he had no profits. So we really only got 1 year's profits to use anyway, which is 3 years ago, and there won't be enough of that from 2 years' losses. So it's a really good idea, but actually it can not have the impact that you would think it would in the wrong circumstances.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You're always going to have problems with a sort of straddled period, aren't you? Again, thank goodness for tax software, because it's not like the old days where you literally had to sit there with a page of prorated calculations to work out what you could do. Mehul, so here's the thing. I'm not sure you're old enough to remember the last time that we were in this sort of environment of extending loss carrybacks. Were you about doing that? You're very fresh-faced, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm probably slightly younger than the three of you. Yeah, I was probably just early on in my career when that probably kicked off. And as you probably say, it was tax software that probably saved us rather than having to do all the manual calculations.
Indeed. Adam, you got any thoughts?
Not much more than Barry's, really. I do remember it. Obviously, I'm old enough to remember it. But yeah, as I think Barry's pretty much covered it, so nothing much more to add there, I'm afraid.
Okay, so I mean, to be honest, we're starting to sort of approach the end of our session. I think between all of the partners in the two sessions, we've certainly looked at all of the personal tax breaks. We've covered some inheritance tax, although there isn't much change to that. We had capital gains, not much of a change to that. I spoke a little bit about research and development, and just to sort of pick up on that, if you do have any questions about R&D and you want to specifically come and speak to me about that, then please do send us an email and we will do our best to assist. Or you can go to our website at www.raffingers.co.uk/contact to get in touch with us, and we can do that. We've touched on the personal tax and the opportunities for personal investments and the green savings bonds and the extension to social investment tax relief. We've touched on SEISS, stamp duty holidays. Did anyone particularly want to just touch base on VAT and the fact that we've got a reduced rate of 5% for sort of in the hospitality sector? Is that a good thing to try and regenerate that, keep it going? Any takers for that? Hands in the air.
I can say something on that if it's. Yeah, just from my point of view, again, I think it's a positive step to extend it. I think extend it for another 6 months, and then the 12.5% that comes with the 6 months thereafter shows you the real commitment from the government to try and ease the burden post lockdown and post sort of September, I think, which will be important. It will be very, very interesting to see how the sector responds, because I think the hospitality sector has been probably the worst hit, and it's just really trying to drive as much business as they can and every sort of help that they can get. I know I've spoken to a few of our clients who are in that sector, and they were just wanting more. I know we've got these restart grants that they can look at, and additional loans I think Lee touched on earlier. But the VAT is welcome, but I just feel they could have done a little bit more on that as well in terms of supporting more impacted sectors from the crisis.
Yeah, sure. Couldn't agree more with that. Barry, got any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things Rishi Sunak said way back at the beginning of the pandemic is he's not going to be able to save every business, and it would be unrealistic to expect the government to be able to do that. If you were looking for a sector which desperately needs help, it would be the hospitality sector. It's been decimated in a way which I think no other sector can even match. I say that as someone whose wife is in the sector, so I see it firsthand. Yeah, any help that sector gets is going to be appreciated. It may prove to be too late, but I don't think that's necessarily the government's fault. You know, they're not, as he said, they just don't have the resources to save every business, and they're just doing the best they can, I think.
Yeah, do you know, I'd agree with that. So I've got 3 grown-up boys. Actually, I don't know if you can just see sort of over there. That's a picture of me and my 3 grown-up boys in Vegas about 2 years ago, before COVID was even thought of. And they all work in the industry, and to some extent I catch up with them, and we've got pubs that are trying to do takeaways and businesses which are closed and kids on furlough. And I think certainly without the furlough and without this, I've seen firsthand the industry, as you say, Barry, it's absolutely decimated, and we're kind of all fingers crossed that hopefully when we come out of this, there'll be jobs for everyone at the end. Thankfully, a couple of them are employed by, my kids are employed by quite large chains, but similarly, one of my other boys has changed from one job to another because basically the pub he worked for had to close. I suppose similarly on that front, we touched earlier on furlough. Just any thoughts on that, other than, was it right to sort of keep it going that long? Was it necessary? Do we think it's going to stop in September, or is it going to have to spill into next year? I mean, Adam, have you got any thoughts on furlough and how it affects us?
No, I mean, I don't think they had any choice but to keep it going for a further period of time. I think obviously September is the first target, although I think there's a fair chance it may well carry on past that. I suppose if businesses can get back reopened, end of June, as is all by then, which is the intention, that gives sort of a 3-month period for the government to monitor the situation. I suppose they can then decide whether they need to extend it further. But I think one of the complaints previously was they left it too late to extend it. So I think they would have to really probably by the end of middle of July, middle of August or end of August, make that decision, because I think that the problem previously was people had already started making redundancies before they were aware of the extension of furlough. So in order to retain jobs, they need to make sure that they're upfront with it, and they if they are going to extend it further, there's a clear message early enough to avoid unemployment rising to the rates that potentially they could get to.
Yeah, for sure. So we're kind of looking, I think, shortly to start wrapping up. There's just a couple of things I need to say. Firstly, we have had a question from Peter Harris. One of the other partners who was on earlier has just given me an answer to the question. Rather than me try and read it and absorb it and give you an answer now, can we come back to you by email? Question, because I'm not completely sure of the answer, but we will look into that. Can I also basically say this morning, thank you to everyone for all of your questions. Let's see, if you send, just last time to remind you, you can email us at info@raffingers.co.uk for any further information. And this video will be available to catch up and share with friends/colleagues on all of our social media channels. They never said that. I wouldn't have done it otherwise. This is clearly going to haunt us for a long period of time. In my retirement in 10 years' time or whatever it is, you remember this. So anyway, I think we're kind of coming to an end. We've literally just got 4 minutes before we're going to close off. Thank you everyone who's tuned in to sort of listen to our thoughts and observations. Just to finish off, has anyone got any closing comments? I'll start with Barry, because you seem to have done an inordinate amount of research since 5 o'clock this morning. Any other sort of just overview and wrap up comments about the budget?
I was going to say something about the furlough. I was also going to ask my daughter why she's sending us questions that she could ask me when I'm at home. But I
wasn't going to mention that. Hello, Zoe.
Yeah, I was going to say something about furlough. I'm not sure this is going to be as kind and neutral as what Adam said. I think furlough is in danger of doing more damage, harm than good if we run it too long. There's an argument for saying extend it, because it allows people to sort of like spread the cost of as things grow slowly, you know, as things all come back slowly, you can bring people back slowly. I think extending furlough too long will actually encourage people to keep people in jobs which are, let's be honest, gone. And that is, whilst that will help those individuals in question, I think that does a lot of long-term damage to everybody else. You know, we need to get people working in productive jobs, not jobs that are ceasing to exist, however sad that is. And, you know, there's a danger that all we're doing is pushing the can down the road, and the problem will just come back later. We may as well address that problem as soon as possible. And if you push people too far down the road with that, the things that are designed to encourage employment, like the super deduction, which has got a 2-year lifespan, you know, we could find people pushing people further down the road beyond the point where they can get the benefit of those type of things, and the grants that are available for retrading and all the other things. So I think extending the furlough is a double-edged sword. It obviously helps in some circumstances, but it also has a danger attached to it.
Yeah, I mean, one other slight thing with my old Inspector of Taxes hat on, obviously I've still got a lot of friends that work on that side of the fence, and I know they've got units that are sort of looking at potential furlough frauds and bits. I think it's one of these ideas. I think it's great in principle. There is a very small minority, certainly not any of our clients, that sort of possibly abuse the furlough or even use their planning for furlough rather than what it's intended. And of course, that can only but damage the economy, can't it? But Mehul, have you got any wrap-up comments? We've got a couple of minutes.
Just very quickly, I think two sort of comments. I think Barry touched on one around the productivity. I think the big issue pre-COVID was, and what the government always talks about, was productivity in the economy and getting that up. I think that's something that's been put on the back burner because of COVID, and I think that's going to be a big thing, and furlough really masks over that. And I think the key thing here is going to be getting productivity up in the economy post-COVID. And then secondly, with Brexit issue, again, nothing really to sort of help businesses that are suffering from Brexit from the budget, apart from the free ports, which again is reinventing an old idea anyway. So I would have loved to have seen more on Brexit, because I think the real impact of that hasn't necessarily been felt. And there are a lot of our clients that I know of who are suffering from Brexit and trying to navigate their way through the more complicated legislation. So I would like to have seen a bit more.
Perfect. Adam, any sort of closing thoughts from you, or have we?
No, I think it's all been covered.
Yeah, I personally, without being in any way political, I'm not really a political animal, but my personal view is I think he did the best job in the circumstances. I have to feel sorry for Rishi Sunak. You've kind of reached the pinnacle of your career. potentially, if he's not going to be a prime minister. And you've ended up in the most prestigious job, and at the same time it coincides with like some super disasters that have been going on, and instead of trying to make the country better and do some innovative work, you're just trying to keep the country afloat. I think you have to feel sorry for anyone who lands in a great job just at the same time as a big car crash, to be honest. So I think he's done the best he can, to be honest, but it'd be interesting to sort of get views from anyone else. I say, if anyone wants to email us, last time I'll sort of give the call out. You can always email us at info@raffingers.co.uk. Contact us. As I said, the video's there to be watched. Any questions, we will come back to you. As I said, Peter, if you're still with us, I will get someone to come back to you with an answer to your question. Zoe, your dad will answer that question about how do you honestly find a work-life balance, Dad. I don't know. The guy's doing research at 5 in the morning. It's hugely impressive, but it needs to be called. Anyway, I think it's time for us to... I'd like to thank very much the other partners for joining me today. Earlier, that was Yedidia, Lee and Paul. This time round, it's Barry, Adam and Mehul. Many thanks for listening. Hopefully it was informative, different views from different people, and we'll leave it there. So thank you very much. Hope your business stays